You know, at this point, I'd say if you ever get a realistically terrifying vision of death, your best bet is to just stay inside, wrap yourself in some bubble wrap, and hope for the best. But then again, let's be honest, that probably still wouldn't stop death from getting creative. What's up everybody, I'm Keelan, this is Kill the Credits, and today we're racing head on into my review for the Final Destination, otherwise known as Final Destination 4. If you're new here, my channel is dedicated to all things horror, movies, reviews, discussions, deep dives, you name it. So if that's your thing, be sure to hit the subscribe button so you can join in on the conversation too. So this is part 4 of my Final Destination review series, leading up to Final Destination Bloodlines. If you haven't already seen my reviews for the previous 3 films, go ahead and click the card up above, check those videos out, and then come back to this one. And as always, spoiler warning ahead. But if you don't care about spoilers, or you just need a refresher on what's gone on in the franchise thus far, then stick around, because this video is for you. Alright, let's strap in and see how well this installment holds up. So a quick little plot overview. In the Final Destination, we follow Nick O'Bannon, played by Bobby Campo, as he experiences a horrific premonition at a racetrack. In this vision, a crash sends debris flying, cars exploding, and people dying in all sorts of spectacular ways. Naturally, Nick freaks out, convinces a handful of people to leave, and then, just as expected, the accident unfolds just as he saw it. And with Death's plan thrown off, the survivors now have a target on their backs. So one by one, they all start to get picked off, and using multiple premonitions throughout the movie, Nick tries to stop it. But let's be real, nobody stops death. So let's go ahead and talk about the cast and the characters. So one of the areas that I think the Final Destination does struggle with is in the character department. They're not exactly the most memorable in the franchise, but that doesn't mean that they don't have their moments. First, let's talk about the protagonist, Nick. While Nick doesn't have the same emotional weight as some of the prior protagonists, he's still a solid final guy. He really does try his best, but you can tell he's kind of winging it the whole way through. We also have Chantal Van Santen as Lori Milligan. So Lori, Nick's girlfriend, plays the supportive role and shares the final battle with Death. She doesn't really get a ton of development, but she tries her best. Then we have Nick Zano, who plays Hunt Wynorski. Fuck are these names? So every Final Destination movie needs an obnoxious best friend character, and Hunt is that guy. He's cocky, sleazy, a little insufferable, but he is sort of entertaining in a love to hate him kind of way. Plus, his death scene is probably one of the most wacky in the entire franchise. But easily the standout for the entire cast is Mykelti Williamson as George Lanter. So George is a security guard at the racetrack with an extremely tragic backstory, giving this movie some much needed emotional weight. His dynamic with Nick is also a highlight, and he really does give some great and heartwarming moments until Death decides he's had enough. So on that note, let's go ahead and get into the kills. Number 1, let's go ahead and touch on the big disaster at the beginning, the racetrack crash. So the setup for this one is huge. A massive raceway accident leading to an explosion-filled massacre. That should have been next level insane, and it kind of is. Honestly, the sequence itself is really cool in concept, but the heavy reliance on CGI really makes a lot of the moments weightless. Even still, I will say that it's an effective opening, and watching the cars fly into the stands is genuinely terrifying. I probably won't be watching any races live anytime soon. And so, let's move on to the second most traumatizing scene in the movie, Hunt's death. Hunt's death really is unhinged in one of the best ways. Essentially, he gets sucked butt first into a pool drain, which, yes, saying that out loud, I understand it sounds completely ridiculous. And then we watch as his insides get violently vacuumed out. It's extremely over the top, but honestly, that's kind of what makes it fun. So one of the things that this franchise does so well is its misdirection, and the scene with the salon rock to the face definitely keeps that trend intact. There's so many things going on in the setup that convinces you the death is going to happen in a very specific way, then it doesn't, and then all of a sudden she's taken out by a flying rock to the eye. Not the most extravagant death, but definitely a little unexpected. Alright, so all of that being said, I obviously do have some fun with this movie, but there are quite a few flaws. The number one thing that I do have a problem with is the 3D and the CGI effects. They're just too much. The movie was heavily marketed as a 3D experience, which 3D can be cool, but if you're not watching it in 3D, it really doesn't look good. A lot of the effects look off, the CGI blood looks weird. It really just doesn't hold up, and it hurts the viewing experience, especially when you compare it to some of the more practical effects in the previous 3 films. The second thing that I take take issue with, and I kind of previously mentioned it, is that the characters just aren't really strong. The cast does a decent job, but there's just really not much depth to their characters in comparison to characters in the other installments. And the final issue that I have is that sometimes the deaths kind of just come off a little bit more goofy than they do scary. Now, I personally don't always mind that. It does make for a fun time, but it is worth mentioning that this installment leans way more into absurdity than it does tension. That being said, this is still a blast to watch if you just go in with the right mindset. If you go in expecting serious horror, you might be disappointed. But if you're here for a good time with some ridiculous death sequences, fast-paced plot, and some classic Final Destination chaos, then I'd say this movie absolutely delivers. And the last thing that I'd like to talk about, while it's not necessarily a flaw or a problem, it's more so just something I want to touch on, and that would be the ending. So after thinking they've finally broken the cycle, Nick, Lori, and their friend Janet try to move on, but then, in classic Final Destination style, surprise, it was all part of Death's plan. In a sudden, brutal twist, the trio is obliterated by a speeding truck. End scene, credits roll. It's an ending that's quick, dark, and perfectly in line with the franchise's twisted sense of humor. So, is the Final Destination the best in the series? Not quite. Does that mean it's not fun? I wouldn't say that either. It's definitely the most ridiculous installment, but there's still plenty of enjoyment and fun to be had. Just embrace the wild kills, the exaggerated effects, and pure popcorn movie energy. There's definitely a good time waiting for you if you go in like that. So with all of that being said, I'm gonna have to rate the Final Destination a 5.5 out of 10. I know that's pretty low, but it's cool. It's just a cool rating. The movie's a cool movie. It's flawed, but it's still a fun and chaotic ride. But now I want to know what you think. Do you love this movie despite its issues? Please let me know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this review, be sure to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss an upload. And that's a wrap. The Final Destination might not have been the best, but at least we survived it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.